Hello students, welcome to this explanation on CVP. This is a very nice old test paper, exam paper question. It's called Fab Fragrance. Let's read together. Fab fragrance manufacturers produce two different types of perfumes for him and for her. The products are produced and sold separately. Fragrances are sold in bottles of 50 milliliters each. The production manager, Mrs. Nice Aroma, is worried about the sales of the products. She does not have adequate financial knowledge and approached you for help. She provided the following summary. So there they've given you for him and for her. So for him, they've given you a selling price, a variable cost, as well as a total fixed cost. For her, there's a selling price, a variable cost, and also a total fixed cost. Then during the year ended 31st December 2018, Fab fragrance manufacturers were actually able to sell 2,000 bottles for him, 3,500 bottles for her. The financial manager aims to earn the following profit. So now they've given you a predetermined profit of we've done a certain thing, but this is what we now plan to do. So the profit that they plan for him is 500,000. And for her is 550,000. And then they've given you a list of required parts, right? So they've told you that in number one, they ask you what is the net profit for him and for her during the year ended 31st December. Then how many bottles for her should be produced and sold to break even in number two. In number three, how many bottles of for him should be produced in order and sold in order to attain the profit of 500,000. So this is your predetermined profit. Then suppose the selling price of for him drops to 400 Rand. How many units will have to be produced and sold to break even? Calculate the break even point for him if the variable cost drops by 5%. Then calculate the contribution margin ratio for her if the sales price increases by 10%. Calculate the margin of safety in units in Rand value for him and her, and then use the initial amount stated in the question and ignore the decreases and increases that were required. Right. So let's just correct that part. Required before. Right. So let's see. Number one, the net profit earned for him and for her. Let's see. They say that they sold 2,000 bottles for him and 3,500 bottles for her. So I'm going to start with number one. And I think we should do the for him first. So in number one, then for him, we're going to say, I'm just going to split this page in two. So for him, we need to go and see what is the formula for profit. So profit is the contribution margin times the units minus the fixed cost. That's the formula for profit, right? So at this point, we have been given the contribution margin. We can calculate it. We've been given the units and we have the fixed cost. If I go back to for him, I can calculate the contribution margin by saying the contribution margin here should be the difference between the selling price and the variable cost. And if I say 500 minus 135, I get 365, right? That would be my contribution margin. They've also told me the number of bottles that were sold. So we have the units, it's 2,000 bottles. And then we need to calculate the profit as stated. So going back, we're going to say profit, I'm just going to call it P, is equal to the contribution margin, 365 times the units for him. It was 2,000 bottles minus the fixed cost. The fixed cost for him was 400,000. If I do that calculation, 365 times 2,000 minus 400, I get to an answer of 330,000. Right, let's look at for her. So once again, the profit is going to be the contribution margin times the units minus the fixed cost. Let's see, what was the contribution margin for her? It should have been the difference between the selling price, 650, and the 200 Rand, which was 450 Rand contribution margin. Going back to the question, I'm going to say the contribution margin is 450 Rand. They've given us the units. They said it was 3,500 bottles. So I'm going to say times 3,500 minus the fixed cost. They've also given us the fixed cost, 220,000. If I do that calculation, 450 times 3,500, and I add to, I subtract from that, I beg your pardon, the 220,000 Rand fixed cost, I get 355,000. Right, so if you know your formula for the cost, or the profit, I beg your pardon, this question should not have been too tricky for you. Going back to the question, we are on required 2. They say, how many bottles of for her should be produced and sold in order to break even? Right, so we are on number 2. How do I get to break even? They've asked break even in units because they ask how many bottles. So break even in units is the fixed cost divided by the selling price per unit minus the variable cost per unit. And we need to do the calculation for her. Let's just keep that in mind. So the fixed cost was 220,000. The selling price was 650 minus 200. I believe that was 450. So 220 divided by 450, how much do we get? If I type that into my calculator, I get 488,88 repetitively, but I am going to round to 489 because you cannot produce 88% of a unit. So the break even 489. Great. We are on required number 3. How many bottles of for him should be produced to make a profit of 500,000 Rand? So we need to answer for him, and there's a profit of 500,000 Rand. In required number 3, we are back to our formula for profit. So profit equals what? Profit equals the contribution margin times our units minus our fixed cost. So now they've told us in the question that they need to make 500,000 Rand profit. We know that the contribution margin, we've calculated it for him, 365. The units we do not know, but the fixed cost for him we do know, and that was 400,000. So from this point forward, simple mathematics, I need to take the 400 over the rainbow. So it's going to be 500,000 add 400,000 because we need to change the sign is 365 units. We want to know what the units are, so we need to then get an answer and divide by 365. So 900,000 equals 365 units. I'm dividing on each side. So I get my answer for units, in other words, bottles, to be, I get 2465,75. However, we are not going to make 75% of a bottle. So it's going to be 2466 units to make a profit of 500,000. Right, so if you know your formula for profit, this should not be too difficult. Next, they ask us in number 4, suppose that the selling price drops for him, to 400 Rand, how many units will have to be produced and sold to break even? So now the selling price is changing. So I'm just going to make a note. We are on number 4 and we are busy with calculations for him. These questions tend to give you 2 products so that it can confuse you, and when you don't read properly, you do the right calculation but for the wrong product, so then your answer is wrong. So please pay attention to that. They say that the selling price should drop to 400 Rand, right? Then what was the variable cost? The variable cost for it was given as 135. And we also had fixed cost, which was 400. So there has now been a change in the selling price. It's now 400 Rand. So if I look at my contribution margin now, 400 minus 135 gives us 265 Rand contribution margin. And they're asking us to do the break-even units. So break-even in units is fixed cost divided by the selling price minus the variable cost of a unit. The fixed cost was 400,000, and then the difference between this selling price and the variable cost, or the new selling price and the variable cost, is 265. If I do that calculation, 400,000 divided by 265, I get to an answer of 1509,43, and of course I am going to round it 1509. Right, so that was not too difficult. It was a change in the selling price. Let's look at required number 5. Calculate the break-even point for him if the variable cost drops by 5%. Right, so we're still busy for him. So I'm just making notes for myself. We're on number 5. We need for him calculations. So for number 5, for him, I am going to say we need to go and see the selling price is 500 Rand. Then they say the variable cost needs to drop by 5%. So the variable cost is 135 Rand, but if we drop it by 5%, it will be 95% of the original amount, right? So 135 times 95% is 128.25. So now we can again calculate our contribution margin. And our contribution margin will be 500 minus 128.25. And that is 371.75. Right, so for required number 5, we need the break even again. So let's just write it like this. So break even in units is again our fixed cost divided by our selling price minus the variable cost per unit. The fixed cost for him, 400,000, and then 371.75 was the difference between the selling price and the variable cost. If I type that into my calculator, I get units of, I'm just going to write it there, I get units of 1075.99, so rounded 1076. Right, Going back to our question, let me just see. Right, we are on number 6. They say calculate the contribution margin ratio for her if the sales price increases by 10%. Right, we are on required number 6. And I'm just making a note for myself. I need to do a calculation for her so that I don't use the wrong information. They tell us that the selling price needs to increase by 10%. So if I look at the selling price, it is 650. And if I'm going to increase it by 10%, it's going to be times 1.1. So 650 times 1.1 gives me 715. There is a variable cost given for her. It's 200 Rand. So our contribution is going to be 515. Right. They've asked us to calculate the contribution margin ratio. Contribution margin ratio. So what is the formula for that one again? It is your contribution divided by your sales. And contribution is the difference between the selling price and the variable cost. Time divided by the sales. So if I look at the contribution, it's 515. If I look at the selling price, it's 715. So that is going to give us a contribution margin ratio of 0,7202, and in percentage it's going to be 72,0 because it's 70 to 7%, which is then 72,03%. Right, contribution margin, increase in sales price. Quite simple to do. Then we are on the last required part, where they ask us to calculate the margin of safety in units and in Rand for him. Important. Use the initial amounts and not the decreases and increases stated before, right? Okay, so we need to do the margin of safety in units and Rand value for him. Right, let's try. We are on required number 7 and we need to do calculations for him. So let's talk about the margin of safety. The margin of safety is the difference. So if this is actual sales and this is break-even sales, the margin of safety lies in between there. So if I talk about, split it like this, the margin of safety ratio, it is the actual sales units minus the break-even units divided by the actual, and for the ratio we times it by 100 to get to the percentage. I don't think that we've calculated the break-even units for him yet. So let's just do that. So break-even units for him is going to be, if we refer to the original information, it's going to be 400,000 divided by 500 minus 135. So if I do that calculation, it was 1096 units. Right, then we are still on number 7. Then I'm going to say, so the margin of safety we said is actual sales units minus break-even sales units divided by actual. If we want the ratio, we need to times it by 100. So for the actual sales units, they have given us that information for him and for her. Yeah, they said the actual was 2,000 and 3,500. So if I go back, the actual was 2,000 bottles. The break even we just calculated 1096 divided by 2,000, and for the ratio it's going to be times 100. So if I say 2,000 minus 1096, that's going to be 904 divided by 2,000. I get on my calculator 0,452, and then in percentage it's going to be 45.2%. Right, so this is the margin of safety ratio, just by the way. So if we had to do the margin of safety only, as is required, we will simply say the actual minus the break even. So it's actual minus break even. So that would just be the 2,000 minus 1096. That is very easy. So the difference there, let me just check that again, was 904 units. Then they've also asked for the margin of safety. So this was the ratio that I just threw in there, by the way. And then for number 7, the last part, they ask us the margin of safety in Rand. And there we take our margin of safety units and we times it by the selling price. And we are busy with calculations for him, just by the way. So the margin of safety units, we just calculated 904. What was the original selling price for him? It was 500. So the margin of safety in Rand is 452,000. Right. So this was quite the interesting question. I really enjoyed it. And I hope that you now understand how fundamental it is for you to study your formula sheet. I hope that you've enjoyed this question as well, and I will then see you in our next video. Keep well until then.